Well, hello and welcome to our Friday live stream with Team Tim. I'm Jesse. We have kind of one and a half Tims here today because Tim Golden is out in, I think, Costa Rica for a family wedding. We have Tim Schnur as always, but wanted to take a quick second and introduce the rest of the panel for you today. First, at least on my left, is Henry Zhang. Henry, you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Absolutely, man. Glad to be back. This is my third time on the show with you guys. Always a great time to be here.
Yeah.
I'm a co-founder over at Sention. We're a configuration hardening tool looking to just help managed service providers make their baselines a little bit easier to set up without all of the sort of hassle of working with group policy, dealing with users, operations, all that kind of stuff. So fun things for me every day.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Henry. And then with us, I think for the first time, we have Dan Lee from Red Cup IT. Dan, you want to say a quick few words?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, everyone. I'm a founder of an MSP and MSSP where we focus on shift left and building more secure environments from the start. And Sention is one of the tools that we use to help accomplish that.
Great. Thank you. And then we have Zach, who is his first time on the live stream. So I wanted to have him introduce himself quickly.
Sure. Thank you, Jesse. My name is Zach. I am a new member of Fort Mesa as a channel sales director. Prior to my time with Fort Mesa, I owned a retail franchise and have spent some time in probably would be what some MSPs would consider to be their target market. So bringing kind of a perspective of the other side to the table here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. And then, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Matthew Fish from Fort Mesa, CEO. Matt, I want to say hi real quick.
Hey guys, so configuration's my jam on endpoint hardening. So I'm excited today to hear about this. Is we're finally reaching acceptance out in the end market, and I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And so, yeah, that's a great segue into the topic today. We're talking about secure configuration for endpoints. And I think, like you said, it's starting to become more mainstream. And we talk a lot about how do we bring value or actually convey the value of the services we're offering the customer to them. And I think this is a great way to do that because today we're talking about how security as a byproduct of quality. And what do I mean by that? Well, secure configuration of an endpoint is not just keeping it safe, it's keeping it standardized. And with standardization, you have efficiency gains, you have less configuration errors, things break less. And so I think when we talk about configuration and securing the endpoint with the client and configuration templates, we could talk about it as a product of quality and quality assurance rather than just security. And so I don't know, I want to kick it over to you, Henry, and get your thoughts on that and maybe kick us off here.
Absolutely, man. I think it is always that sort of thought process about security being a process, right? You skip a step and you lose something, and then you start to have problems further down the line, especially with things like configurations. Where I think sort of where we started was looking at this sort of face value idea of, hey, I set something on or I turn something on, right? And as long as it's working, it's good to go. The sort of problem that we encountered with that is that it's kind of weird to say, but it's almost like an IT-focused mindset as opposed to a security-focused one. And so when it comes to IT and our experience over there, it's just like, hey, if it works, don't fuck with it. If it's not broken, don't fix it, right? But unfortunately, security doesn't really work out the same way because we need to know all the time that it is working or that it is set up properly and be able to have that audit trail going backwards. And that's sort of been the trend that we're trying to move toward.
Right. Well, that's actually we have somebody on the stream today, Dan. I think you could give good perspective on that because you're doing both managed IT and managed security over at Red Cup. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
So in terms of that, how do you see that, and how do you walk that line with the client?
I think good IT and good security means that it's a good experience where you're able to deploy and implement security, educate the user at the same time, educate the stakeholders, the business, and then be able to roll out controls in a prescriptive but yet effective way that people will not go around it, where you're not going to slow down the business, lock people out, things like that. So I think it's important to test and go slow. But the goal would be to get to the point where you could possibly, implement CIS IG1 and then eventually IG2, or pull down the controls that make sense for the business. So I think it's all about learning the environment and talking to the business users, the end users, and that's kind of how we think about security and IT together. They are kind of two different departments, but it goes hand in hand. So if you have one without the other, you'll have a great IT program but horrible security, or a great security program but everyone hates you because it's hard to work. Right? So I think having it together, considering both, is really important.
Yeah,
I think you nailed that balance. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. But Tim's going to take off here. Tim, enjoy your wedding. We'll talk to you soon. Talk to you next week.
Thanks.
Should we clarify that Tim's not getting married?
He already is married with his daughter. Yes.
Congrats on the marriage, Tim.
Yeah. Baby on the way. Yeah.
Enjoy a Corona for me, my friend. What was I going to say?
I'd love to hear more about that, like that balance, right? Give us a little more like color on the conversations you have with customers, right? Because like obviously a lot of security is frictionless, right? In terms of a longer login process, a longer authentication process, some nagging things here and there, getting shut out of systems, right? How do you balance that, in terms of it sounds like you're striking the balance, which is a very tough thing to do for MSPs. So
I think we try to roll everything out slowly to test users first, and then deploy in a monitor only mode. So for example, if we're going to deploy an antivirus, it'll be in monitor only for a week or two to gather data. If we're going to use something like Threat Locker for application allow listing, same thing. Or rolling out a new firewall, a new SASE tool, usually we'll try to use it in monitoring mode where it's not blocking, it's not going to stop anybody, but gather data. And I think that's where it's important to use modern tools that give you that ability to see what's going on. And then also something that we do that's I think probably unique is not a QBR with our customers, but we also talk to them every week. So we have a standing weekly meeting with our customers. It just gives them a opportunity to bubble up any problems, any issues. So that's something that we're doing that's different than a lot of our people in the field. We're not talking to customers every month or every quarter, it's every week. And if customers are onboarding, we'll talk to them.
I think that's huge. And I say the more services you're offering to the clients, the more touch points you need, right? Because you're going to have more things going on and more potential friction points that if left unaddressed, they could poison the well with the relationship. So I think that's a great idea. If you can just get in front of them quickly and say, hey, let's chat, anything come to mind, and just, I think the other piece of that is being able to capture those things, right? And then turn them back into the business and make sure something gets done about them because you don't want to meet next week and say, oh yeah, we actually didn't do anything about that. So maybe talk a little bit about what's your process for doing that. When something comes up with the client, how does that process look internally, and how you turn that back around to make progress on it in the week you talk to the client?
Sure. So basically what we do is we have Halo PSA as our ticketing system, if you will, but we also use Notion, and every single customer has a Notion page, and we also use Jira as well. So although we're an MSP, we run more like a SaaS company or a software company where we take a feedback loop and we log the notes from every call, have action items from every call. So whether that's helping the customer directly to solve something or something we can retool to re-engineer and make it better, that's something that we're working on. We use a lot of SaaS tools here at Red Cup, so we've learned a lot from how these SaaS companies operate. They always place a CSM, like customer success manager, where they're always available to chat with you and talk to you about what problems you have. Then they take it back to their engineering team. If somebody's getting locked out 5 times a week, okay, something's wrong there. So let's go deep dive, figure it out, and make that problem go away if possible. Whether it's a new solution or really figuring out what's causing that to happen so many times. And even in our Halo PSA, we have an automate button where any one of our techs can click this button and it says automate this, meaning they've seen this issue 2 or 3 times. That means the customer is being frustrated. So we made an automate button where anybody in our company can click that, and it opens up a Jira ticket in the back end. for an engineer to take a look at that issue and see if we can make it our way for good.
So speaking of stuff that you guys do,
fantastic
Dan,
tips. I love it.
something that I learned about what you guys do at Red
Right.
Cup that I thought was really, really interesting. And this is kind of on like the topic of like having secure configurations and trying to figure out what works for you guys. You want to tell people a little bit about what you guys do at Unicorn Farm?
Oh yeah, so we built a cloud-based environment. It's based on Beyond Identity, Okta, and then we added a few SaaS apps like NetSuite, Salesforce, and Microsoft 365 with the hardened baseline. And then we connected to that a Jamf managed Apple computer and then an Intune managed Windows computer. And then what we did was we deployed a DoD STIG to it to harden that Windows device. We also installed Threat Locker, Huntress, and a bunch of other standard MSP tools, put everything in full lockdown. We took it to DEF CON, I think 30 last year. We put a Hack Me sign on the back of it, held it up at the conference, where hundreds of people could see us and the laptop. And basically we had a lot of people come up to us and ask us like, hey, how did you build this device and this environment? And basically we describe the environment that, we use Beyond Identity to have device trust at the SSO layer, which is checking for encryption, BitLocker, Intune. It checks, to make sure that your EDR is running and all these different things and before you get into the SaaS environment. And then another thing that we do that's unique is we're using conditional access in Beyond Identity, Okta, and Azure AD. So it's like a triple identity system where one routes to the other. So you'd have to basically hop through all these loops in the back end even to get into the environment. And basically after we spent 5 or 10 minutes describing how the architecture is set up, a lot of these people that are hackers, they basically told us that, that's too hard to get into. I would rather go hack another company with less security and less controls in place. But the nice thing about this environment is it's all very modern, and for the users, it's a very seamless sign-in experience, and they don't really notice that, there's 45 different policies in the back end that are, putting this one person in through that sign-in process.
That's great. That's great. I had something I wanted to ask Henry, just changing gears a little bit here. When we talk about standardizing an endpoint and, you talk about applying STIGs, maybe an MSP owner or an internal IT manager might think, well, do I really need this? Can't I just do this in Active Directory? And what's the answer to that?
There's a lot of different answers to that, right? I think modern age Active Directory is not as common in utilization anymore. And in particular, I think for an MSP, and maybe Dan, you can speak to this as well. I understand it's kind of a pain in the ass to use Active Directory as a managed service provider owner, right? You have to keep everything on-prem. You're looking at managed devices. You're looking at a lot of stuff that most clients today don't really want to use. And at the end of the day, if you're using Active Directory, you'll be using the GPO system on that one. And the way we look at it is if you're using domain group policy, you're accepting maybe like a 10, 20% chance risk that something just won't apply, and then you'll just never know about it. And so from our standpoint, it's like, yeah, you could go ahead and do that. So you can do all this manual setup and processing with Active Directory to keep it integrated with this legacy system that Microsoft is trying to kill, to accept a 20% chance of failure. And I don't know, from my perspective, it's not really the direction we're trying to move. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's more of a ubiquitous approach. So that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I think you might be muted.
Sorry, guys, microphone. Having implemented these Active Directory hardening tactics, I will tell you, it is hard enough to do that in a medium enterprise spread across multiple sites.
Right.
Organizations that are really deeply entrenched in Active Directory, they do need external reporting products to really understand what is actually making it out to the endpoint. And Active Directory is not enough. And for an MSP, first of all, most of you guys are phasing out Active Directory, right? And where you're not, you've got a pile of Active Directories. You don't have a Active Directory, right? You're lucky if all of your customers only have one. So the idea of keeping all those policy enforcements and measuring practices straight and then standardizing and normalizing across customers.
Yeah.
It's really a non-starter using those tools.
Yeah, and I think too, obviously I was playing devil's advocate there and kind of setting you up a little bit, but I think also the big thing for me at least is having a background in financial services clients, investment firms and things like that. You're seeing a ton of M&A, and so this is huge for that, to be able to onboard companies quickly and not have to worry about these huge Active Directory integrations and trust relationships and everything else. You can simply take and apply the templates across endpoints ubiquitously, regardless of the Active Directory structure. And so that's helpful.
So you're telling me you don't like working with trust?
No, I don't. I don't think I'm the only one either.
Shifting gears, I mean, I think the big thing with Dan we really wanted to hear about was tell us, how you picked Sention and you were able to convey that value back to the customer. And I think we're curious as well, are you charging extra, is Sention buried in kind of like an all-in per seat per price? Talk to a little bit about the dynamics, the pricing dynamics, but also the value conveyance, right? That got them to say, oh, I really, I'm excited about Sention coming into my IT stack.
Got it. So going back to the unicorn environment and what we're trying to build, I think like Matthew was saying, basically it takes a lot of work to deploy 400 different controls to Windows 10 or Windows 11 environment. And from moving from on-prem AD to Intune, there are still gaps where certain configurations are missing, and then you basically have to go download all the GPOs and ADMX and then map it from ADMX to Intune. Right. So it took 2 of my engineers months to get to this point, and we still weren't done. So then we had to download the DoD STIGs to try to cover more of those holes. Then we ran Cyber CNS, and it still had more things that weren't locked down. So then that's where the search began to basically, there has to be a better way than manually configuring everything. And then, when you go into the CIS hardening guide, it's like 1,000 pages long. And I had to hire an engineer. And part of the interview process was I asked them, hey, if I gave you a 1,000-page PDF, could you sit there and just configure every single thing one at a time and not lose your mind? And would you be okay with that? And, it took a while until I found an engineer that said, yes, I'll be happy to do that type of work. And then I hired them. And, he never even finished it. We always get pulled away to help clients and things like that. And, it's difficult. So basically, we went online and looked to try to find, a company or a SaaS company that's all they do is Windows 10 hardening. And we found Sention. We're now, in the demo process, we clicked a button and within seconds it had applied. Whereas, we do months of work in Intune, do all this manual mapping, and we deploy it to, let's say, 10 computers, and maybe 9 will apply within 15 minutes or an hour. And then one of them, it just goes for days and there's no reporting. You don't know what's going on, right? So it doesn't really apply, and you don't know why, because Intune's reporting is lacking. And so, how do you scale to the SMB or enterprise when you have thousands of endpoints that need this type of configuration? Or, you're going to the DIB, and this is the requirements for CMMC to get 800.171 certified, and there's no reporting. So how can you tell your client that your computer is 171 compliant when if it fails, it's a black hole? Right. So you need a better tool, basically. Right. So that's where we landed on Sention, because it's real time. It's nearly real time.
So they don't really, they're not really exposed to it, right? This is internal savings, as Jesse was talking about, automation, consistency, right? Standard templates, and just not creating that, I want to almost call it technical debt, right? If you didn't have a tool like Sention, you'd have a lot of technical debt that would create just tons of tickets and headaches and security, downhill security problems, right? So they're not necessarily exposed to it, but it sounds like it's saving you from an internal rollout perspective and an ongoing basis. Is that right? Or
Yeah, that's right. I think just using Windows in itself is technical debt. Choosing to use Windows, you immediately have technical debt, to be honest, and
Yeah,
that's why we have to secure to that point, and
absolutely.
like
So I heard
something
you
else.
talk. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say something else we're doing is also working in DevSecOps. So we also help customers with AWS environments, Azure
Mhm.
environments, GCP, rolling out their applications, and even when you pick an Amazon AMI, there's hundreds of vulnerabilities in Linux already. The second you deploy that server or do a Docker pull, it has hundreds of vulnerabilities. So there's another company called ChainGuard, and all they focus on is Linux image hardening. That's all they do. And there's hundreds of Linux images where when you deploy it, it has zero known vulnerabilities out of the gate. So you're starting at a better place, and that's like the goal with using Sention on the Windows side is how do we get to do what ChainGuard is doing for Kubernetes or Linux on the
Yep.
Windows environment.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I heard you mention, CMMC and how you actually get true performance management of the solution. Like, are we doing what our policies say we're doing and what our controls say we're doing? So that's huge for me right there as I'm thinking about building an offering, right? Because that's where my mind always goes. Is that something you use in your marketing collateral when you're talking to clients like that? Or talk to me a little bit about how you leverage it in terms of going after prospects.
Sure. So I think it does all start with the policies, right? So uh, usually your clients will not want this level of controls for no reason.
Right.
Maybe they're trying to sell to an enterprise company where you're a SaaS provider, you're selling to enterprise, and they expect a SOC 2 report or they expect something done a certain way, or you're in banking and there's FFIEC controls, or you're in the CMMC DIB space and there's those controls that are coming down the pipeline that if I want to apply to an RFP, I need to have this done. Otherwise, I can't even apply for this. I can't bid for this project.
Mm-hmm.
So, first you have to write the policy, and then you have to operationalize it.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you do, usually the audits are annual. So it's a point in time audit, and basically you're compliant today, but tomorrow an engineer in your team or someone deploys something and you're immediately out of compliance. So how do you stay in compliance? That's the hard part. So we have to use a ton of different tools to keep posture in check. So device posture at the endpoint level, cloud security posture management, SaaS security posture management, etc. So it's a lot of work.
Awesome.
Jesse, what do you think? I mean, I think Matt, I think we're ready for a new MSP on our own behalf. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I am curious. Clearly, like I'm oriented around high security hardening, and clients clearly are motivated by things like, can I bid on this contract, and they want some assurances there. But I really am sure. I'm curious how you guys package this. Is this a one-size-fits-all offering for all your customers? Everyone has to have this thing. Do you have a dial where you turn things up from 0 to 10? Do you have like basic security and advanced security? How does this actually materialize out at the at the unit sale level for you?
Got it. So
and
for
are
all
you guys mainly co-managed? It sounds like extremely advanced, right? So like that may change your answer here, but go ahead. Yeah.
I think the goal is to offer enterprise level security at an SMB price, or starting at an SMB price. Although we do have premium pricing, so our starting price is between 200 to 500 per person per month, based on how many controls you need in place, what industry you're in, how many tools are involved, to get to that zero trust point. And also we're sitting on the side of the table of the client and talking to the auditors, providing the evidence, rolling out all these tools. So we're really like a partner of the company. And so we're so deeply ingrained that although even our small clients, it's still a partnership, and it's like co-managed IT. So the way we set it up, the client owns all the tenants. We have access to those tenants, just like GDAP. They own everything and they give us access, and we'll deploy the controls, the templates in place. And if it doesn't work out, they can cut ties, and it's easy because they already own everything. We're just delegated access to everything. So I think in terms of liability, and compliance and auditing reporting, it's easier because everything reports to the business, and we're a unit in that business. We're not like an MSP external provider per se that owns everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, as you said, you pretty much like subrogated yourself from like the liability. You're just a cog in the wheel playing, trying to add value. So it's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Go ahead, Matt.
I'm sure we have some viewers here that are wondering how Red Cup managed to pull off this feat that the customer is responsible for, the commodity, like low value work that for a lot of MSPs makes up the majority of their day, and they're really focusing on this high value security layer, and customers are buying it, right? So, I think there's a little bit of market evidence here that MSPs that are looking to focus on moving towards those value services, that there's gold at the end of the rainbow, I guess.
Maybe I can share my screen if that's okay, and that might help show. But we focus a lot on identity. So every customer gets beyond identity in Okta, and that goes in front of all of your SaaS apps. And so it's a whole passwordless experience. Hopefully I can share this. Let me see if I can get this.
And talk a little about typical client industries, where, regionally where you guys are operating. Are they all like, and then like size as well?
We're based in California, although we operate in every state. We have clients in New York, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Colorado, Arizona. So they're all over the place. And the industries we focus on are mostly financial services and healthcare and enterprise B2B SaaS. So most of our customers are building software themselves. They have full-time developers or outsourced developers, onshore or offshore. And that's where, security is really important, because when you have a remote team or offshore team building your software, that's a supply chain security risk. So you want to make sure that before someone can get into the environment, you have very high assurance that they are who they are. So even when we're hiring people, we run them through an app called With Persona, where it sends them a code. You take a picture of your ID and you do a video face ID as well, a selfie, basically, to make sure that you're going through KYC before you even get access to the Red Cupit IT environment. So we're doing all kinds of stuff here to make sure that we're securing the identity of the user, and then securing the identity of the device as well.
Awesome. Zach K, the second Zach K on the. Welcome, Zach.
Well, thanks for having me. I got to finish up my own webinar before I got to hop on this one, but when I see security configuration management, gotta come on.
You're just a machine today, back to back. So glad you can make it.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, it's been awesome hearing more about the internal workings of your MSP. I mean, identity is where it all starts with your MSP, from what I've learned. I mean, that's huge, and it's awesome to hear Sention's been doing well for you, and including it in that package.
I would actually argue Dan's MSP starts from his calendar. Only man I've ever seen that's got open calendar links at 4 a.m. and he'll show for them.
Yeah, we have some clients in UK and Germany that we're talking to. So yeah.
I'm curious to talk about, I work with a pretty wide variety of different MSPs and where they are at in their journey. And so I'm sure some of the MSPs that are newer or smaller or just getting started or want to make that transition to start offering these value services. Talk about kind of the trajectory of how Red Cup IT started and what that journey looked like to get to where you are today.
I think we started off like as a computer repair shop. Actually, I started the company out of college.
That's a big journey.
Ago. Yeah. Apple PC repair shop, fixed a couple iPhones. Somebody even wanted me to fix an Xbox once. We said no to that right away. And then, we upgraded to business support, break fix. And then from there, after a year of doing that, we got hundreds of customers in Orange County, California, but realized that people will only call you once or twice a year when things are really on fire. that was, very reactive. And, although we provided a good service, it started breaking down because too many people were calling and it was unpredictable. So we did some Googling back in 2011 and found something called MSP. So, we did more research. And, I think we met Len from Autotask, and basically he told us about Autotask and PSA and MSP, and we learned more about the business. And from there, became decided, okay, let's get people on contract so that we have predictable income and we can talk to people, on an ongoing basis, and improve from there. And then 5 years ago, we got lucky and landed a big financial services client. And that's when things got really serious because they wanted to get a SOC 2, FFIEC, and they were getting constantly attacked, because they're a very, very visible company. And so they process 2 million emails a year. And so we had to put iron scales in front of ATP, for example. So it's all about, we didn't realize what we were doing, but we just kept trying to solve problems and provide a good experience. And 5 years later, you get to zero trust and defense in depth and all these keywords. We've been doing it, just because we wanted to have a good experience for the customer. Meaning, you can process 2 million emails, but you're not processing 2,000 phishing emails a month. You need something with AI that can process that for you. The Microsoft accounts got attacked so much that our C levels were getting locked out a couple times a day, a week. So we put Okta in front of that. Then the Okta started getting attacked, where then the Okta got locked out. So then we put a Beyond Identity in front of that, because Beyond Identity is a credential-based, endpoint-based agent that's on your computer. Hackers can't really breach that because it's not publicly available. Because Microsoft login and Okta logins are both publicly available, you can just keep attempting it until you lock the user out. But with Beyond, you can't, because it's not public. It's on your computer. So then that went away. Then we just go on to the next problem. So we just listen to our customers and keep solving problems, keep engineering, and keep looking for solutions. And now we have a tech stack that is like 30 to 50 different tools. So we got to the enterprise level of security without trying to do that specifically. We're just trying to get to a good user experience. Hopefully
I got a question on that one. You maybe exaggerated a little bit, but 30 to 50 security stack. I hear all the time, especially in sales conversations. We have so many tools. They're not even configured. I'm not using them to the full extent. All these challenges. So maybe I missed this part, but how large is your team and how do you manage this stack? And I mean, is it actually 30 plus solutions?
Yeah, it is. And it's actually not enough tools. If you look at the enterprise market and go to the RSA conference, there are, like thousands of startups there, and the average enterprise will use 150 security tools. That's just security. And once you bring in SaaS, an enterprise or an SME company may be using like hundreds or 1,000 SaaS apps in their environment. And you have to have headcount to basically manage that. We have like 15, 20 people. So it's just, instead of going fast to get to that point, it just took a lot of years. And a lot of late nights, a lot of weekends basically spent clicking on every box, reading lots of manuals, a lot of Googling. Luckily now we have ChatGPT. We can leverage that to try to go faster. But yeah, it's just been a lot of work and trial and error.
Yeah, and charging 200 to 500 a seats sounds expensive. I posted something, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Bank of America talked about their total cybersecurity budget alone, not even their IT budget, and it was $1,000 a head. So obviously, you're still relatively cheap. Like as you said, you mentioned 150 tools, which is only you're only applying a third of that. So it sounds like you guys are really figuring out how to stay lean, I guess, from an enterprise basis, but also, justifying that 200 to 500 spend. Talk a little bit about security frameworks that you're chasing. You mentioned SaaS firms that you're supporting. Are they chasing a SOC 2? Are there other credentials that you're, building your security control framework off. Like, just talk a little bit about like how you build these cybersecurity programs, and how does the outside world understand that evidence that you're doing all the right things.
So basically, most of our SaaS companies, or sorry, clients, well, they will look for a SOC. Their customers are looking for a SOC 2 Type 2. So that's what we're building for in terms of the program policies and procedures. And the tools we pick, like an access review tool, every year, every quarter, you have to review all of your logins, for example, and that's usually done via a spreadsheet, and you have to download all your logins across all of your apps, whether they're on-prem or cloud, and then make sure that that's linked to your HR system, right? And that's a very manual process, and then we go look for a tool for that.
I was just going to say, then you need another tool. So here it is.
That fills one control, like a few controls.
Right.
And in like a SOC 2, there's like 85 different controls. And the more apps you have, the more things you have, the more software you need to manage everything, or the more people and time you need to manage it. So we're also partnered with a company called Drata that does compliance automation. And everything is API. There's so much data that's flying around that if you don't have an API, then it's going to be a spreadsheet or a screenshot that you need to provide to the auditor. And so we try to use API native tools as much as possible, because I think we're on the business of data. If you have good data, you can probably provide a good experience, you can provide better security, you can start thinking about, like, can I build a data lake, a security data lake? That's what some of the enterprises are doing, or the best SOC MDR providers are doing, is they're building a security data lake. It's all about the data. So that's why we pick the tools that we pick. And
so do you guys run a SIM as well? Like, is there 24/7 response? Are you using SIM like tool, and then doing security orchestration, things like that? What are you doing? I'd love to know what you're doing with that data.
So internally, what we're doing is we're using Datadog to basically connect all of our tools like Keeper Security, Okta Beyond Identity, AWS, Microsoft 365, and we're piping all the data to one place so that it can help monitor that data. And then we're also partnered with another third-party company for the 24/7 SIM and SOC. And then basically we hook up our Datadog to their environment so that they can read all the data as the SOC.
Gotcha. So not like an elk stack or anything. They're using whatever SIM on their side.
Yeah. I think we're using CyberHawk, and I believe it is elk stack on their end.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Jesse, I think you're talking, but there's some crazy lag. You back? So talk about that. So, and then the organizations that you're working with are paying an external MSSP on top of the services that you're providing. Is that right?
So for the MSSP, we're integrating them into our offering. So our MSP offering and MSSP offering are together, but we do partner with like virtual CISO firms, where they're handling more of the strategy, the nuance of compliance, interfacing with the auditors, and then we're handling the remediation or the build. So we're building a secure environment that then gets audited, basically. So for one of our largest clients, their SOC 2 report mentioned us 90 times in the report. So you can think of us as like the AWS of IT, or it's like a shared responsibility model, and we handle a lot of it basically that way. AWS says, hey, we'll provide your 24/7 security, the moat, the security guards, the redundant power, things like that. So we offer like 50, 30 security tools on top of that sit on top of AWS, so that shared responsibility for the client is very little. So then you get closer and closer to the business, meaning the business should be building their products and helping their customers, not reinventing the wheel in terms of cybersecurity or compliance. And we try not to build data centers anymore, right? Because the three biggest players do a really good job at that. So we try to move up the stack, and then we get to the point of, hey, we did all this. How do we harden the environment? So then let's like use Sention for that, for example. Then you just get deeper and deeper into the, what should be done.
Awesome. And you keep on mentioning you're using very focused vendors, which is kind of why your stack is so large, which is awesome to hear. But you keep on talking about you're identifying a new problem and you need to find a new point solution, which obviously is an approach that's working for you. Are you basing any of this off of an overarching framework? Like, do you leverage the CIS controls, or what's your North Star? Or find a problem, find a solution?
Yeah, we are using the CIS internally because it's very prescriptive. It's an easier model and framework to look at. For example, some of our customers in healthcare, they are, have to comply to HIPAA, but when you actually read the HIPAA guidance, it doesn't really tell you what to do, and it's honestly very confusing still to this day.
It references CIS actually. So
yeah,
yeah,
in some parts, right? And it's a lot of up to interpretation. So we like to use CIS and basically pair that with the business. We'll look at the control and try to implement what makes sense for the business. And you're not going to be able to deploy every single CIS control. It's not realistic, but that is like the framework we're looking at. What we have internally is a CIS export of all the controls, and we map it to the different tools in our stack. So you'll have control, and then you'll have tool. So basically in the sales process, I'll pull up that spreadsheet, scroll down, I'll show the customer the 85 different controls, the 30 whatever amount of tools that are in the stack. And then the customer understands, like, okay, if I hire Red Cup, they'll help me meet all 85, 100 controls, but they're going to deploy all these tools that do that work for, on behalf of both of us. And if you pull out any specific tool, then you start creating gaps in your system, which makes the stack sticky, and it makes it make sense.
Yeah, I love the playbook, right? I mean, you're using the tools to enforce the controls, right? So, as you said, you're building that stickiness. Talk about the vCISO kind of involvement. It sounds like they do a great job, like embedding, and like, are they almost, are they in a lot of the same conversations that you guys are conducting? Is it like a three-way conversation with the vCISO, Red Cup, and client? Is that right? Or, how does it usually work? I mean, because you guys are, it sounds like you're the gatekeeper, right? Like you're kind of like, you've organized all the tools, you set them up, you set up the controls, the tools are enforcing the controls. Obviously policies and procedures, they would have their opinions on, best practices and things like that. But talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think partnering with vCISOs is good because most of our customers build software, and that's a different domain of expertise than what we traditionally have in MSP, which is IT. We're racking and stacking servers, we're spinning up a 365 environment in the cloud. We'll spin up an Azure AD server, but when it comes to the ISV or the software that sits on that server, that's a different story. Or if you're building the software, that's a different story. Now you need a CTO involved to talk about CI/CD and things like that, and then that type of security, or OWASP, and doing a penetration test in the application. So, and then, part of what the CISO should be doing is educating the business, the board, the employees, and the partners and customers with the importance of cybersecurity. And that in itself is a separate job. And, by working with a CISO firm, we can basically tell the same story. Because if I'm trying to push down CIS 18 controls into an environment without the education and without someone backing me up, it's not going to happen, because it's hard to understand why you need all these things, which is also why we like MITRE ATT&CK. So using the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you can talk to the business about, hey, this is what the hackers are doing. So they don't care if you're compliant or not. They just want to get into your environment to steal your data, to ransomware your computers, and get they're financially motivated. So what they're going after is the weaknesses in your system. So whether you're compliant or not, it doesn't really matter when you think of it from an attack perspective. So we also think about MITRE ATT&CK as well as part of the process. Is how do we prevent like MFA push fatigue, which is how Uber went down, right? So use something else. Don't use Octopush, for example.
Yeah. I love this whole conversation, and I haven't been able to say much. I think my stuff is finally working now. So, but I swear, I think I need to take Dan and stick him in front of my clients and say, everything that this guy is doing, you need to go do. So he hit on everything I talk about, right? It's like
unbelievable.
Use and he's proof in the pudding. Lever up to those middle market and enterprise clients by offering premium services, and the way you do that is through education of the client and mapping your own internal services and solutions to a cyber framework, and then having those ready to go and be able to turn around quotes and be very prescriptive. I gotta say, Dan, I think we just became best friends.
Oh, yeah, love having new friends.
and the price point, right? Like where he's achieving himself in the market, like the ideal clients, right? Like the doing the high value services, right? Like as opposed to like a lot of the commodity IT, low value, like high competition, right? Like you've clearly differentiated yourself in your sector, which is awesome. And
And I think too, for people watching, it can seem impossible, right? Like how we can never do that. Well, I mean, he was fixing iPhones to start, right? So
turning down Xboxes.
Turning down Xboxes. He was already had his ICP focused even back then. No, so I think it's important to talk about solving problems and then automating those. I love the idea of the automated button. When we figure something out, we have a process, we automate it, and we spin that into like a miniature CI/CD pipeline, right? In the way we operate, and using that DevOps model is key to be able to build and not just doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So I love it.
You literally posted that a day or two ago, right? Like just on, I've got a problem here. You've got enough bandwidth to go out and try to fix the hard problems, which you're doing, and then you're automating them and you're moving on to the next one. So you're consistently like improving margins, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, you keep on emphasizing the automation and everything. And I mentioned this earlier. I hear that 30 to 50 in your stack, still not enough. Your price point is where I know MSPs are trying to get to today, anywhere from 200 to 500. It's not like you're one in a million. That's where everyone wants to be. They're just not there yet. But even the MSPs I talk with, they maybe have, 15 things in their stack at the 200 price point. And they're like, my margins still aren't big enough. So I think the answer to this is, you automate everything. But I mean, is there more you can elaborate? I mean, how are you able to have so many be at the same price point that all MSPs want to be at and still making your margin?
I think it's a lot of heavy testing internally. I have like 5 iPhones, two iPads, like 3 Windows computers. I have my MacBook Pro has 64 gigs of RAM, so I can run Parallels on it. And if I pull up my screen right now, I have like, Ubuntu and all kinds of stuff running on it. And we try to do that for our team too. And the people that I hire, they're not your on-prem Windows guy. It's someone that's worked in enterprise for a couple of years. It's someone that has worked for MSP for at least 3 years. And, I ask every single hire, hey, do you have a Raspberry Pi? Why that matters is it shows that they have curiosity. It shows that they have a lab at home. Or, sometimes we'll talk to an engineer and I'll hear something loud in the background and, they're like, oh, I'm sitting next to my rack right now with a Fortinet and a Cisco rack switch, and I build a NAS and this and that. And those are the types of people that we hire because we're trying to be at the bleeding edge of technology and security and IT and user experience. We're not trying to do what has already been done many times. So it takes a unique type of curious person and a team that has that curiosity and that ambition to build what we build. And what I tell people is, hey, when I give you access to a software, go in there and click on every single button, look at every single setting, really learn what's in there. As part of the interview process, we'll ask some really obscure questions about Windows or Mac OS or terminal or command line, things like that. So by going really deep into these edge cases, we can suss out, to see if somebody is a fit here or not. And that's how, we can manage these tools, because I make sure that as many people on my team as possible are, for example, if we use LineGuard, they get all LineGuard certified. If they're going to use Sention, they're going to get Sention certified when you guys roll that out eventually, right? And have Sention Academy.
You're getting there.
We hire people that have certs. Certs give you a good framework. you can argue that they're quote unquote useless or they're just a badge, but it gives you that foundation. I think in IT it's called RTFM, read the freaking manual. So if you read the manual, there's stuff buried in there that you wouldn't know if you just try to figure it out yourself. So it's a combination of working with your teammates, digging through and flipping over every rock, and having an insane level of attention to detail is how we're managing it. But it's a lot of work, and so it's really tough to get to this point.
Being willing to learn.
Yeah. I think there's something to be said about this whole, and I call it the powerhouse of profit, is what this creates. This it's the flywheel concept, right, Dan? You know that, right? It's when you're offering premium services and you're narrowing your focus and you're getting clients that are willing to pay those services, then you can afford to hire the top tier talent, and those people are focused and they are curious and they're mad scientists, for lack of a better word, right? They won't let something beat them, and that's the type of team it sounds like Dan has. And so if you haven't read the book The Flywheel, you should go out and read that and understand kind of this is the way you need to operate and run your business, and you get that powerhouse of profit, as I like to call it colloquially.
Well, and if you're an MSP owner and you're not doing those things, you're not taking the steps to progress, to learn, to be on the forefront. I mean, Dan has a team that does that, not because he went and hired a team that does that, because people that do that aren't going to work for somebody that is going to expect them to do it, but isn't willing to do it themselves. So the reason that Dan has this amazing organizational culture is because that's who he is, and that's where his focuses are. And then he attracts those people who are doing the same thing. And then, there was a comment that was put up that in the financial sector, his prices would be considered low. It's another reflection on who he is. He could go out there and press it even more, but he cares about the user experience. He cares about his clients. He cares about his customers. He probably cares about his team members as well. So, I mean, he's done an amazing job of leading in that way. And if you want your MSP to be like that, be willing to learn and be what's on the forefront.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's a lot to be said about continuing self-improvement for us as CEOs leaders, and founders and leaders, right? Exactly. And so they can't neglect that part as well. That's a great point. Appreciate it.
We got a couple minutes left. Dan, the question I'd love to hear, I'd love to ask, I guess, is about the future. Like, so where do you think things are going? I know we get a lot of convoluted answers at conferences. Like, do you see Red Cup expanding? Are you taking private equity funding? Are you looking to merge, or just, systematically, do you see more Red Cups IT, like similar shops, like coming out in the market, right? Because you're relatively unique, Jesse. I don't know if you've heard of a lot of organizations that are playing the key role that you are as, it sounds like you're a gatekeeper, but also orchestrating cybersecurity with multiple, outside parties. So where do you think things are going?
I think it's going one way, which is more regulation, more cybersecurity needed, more cybersecurity required, because, with the geopolitical environment, there's more and more attacks every day. It's getting more and more expensive to be breached. And it's already hard to hire people and deliver, and with companies like making cutbacks, like how are you going to fulfill the need, right? And the hackers all know that companies are laying people off, like Twitter laid off a bunch of trust and security, meaning, okay, let's go after them, right? That's how they think. So we need to put more software and more people and more automation in place, and I think it makes sense for MSPs to grow into that, because that's a need that's going to be very horizontal, meaning it goes across all industries and all environments. So I think there's a very massive opportunity for us as MSPs to fill that void, but it means that we all have to level up our own internal security and really use dog food. So if we sell it, we use it, and we use it, like I said, every feature. So we'll usually push the vendors to do more. We're putting in feature requests like, hey, you're missing SSO. Hey, you're missing logging. Stuff that other enterprise tools have, we'll ask our vendors to have, right? Because we want to hold our MSP vendors up to the enterprise standard. That way we can be playing at the same level that they are as they are, because that's the hackers are playing at the tier 1, right? And if we're using a tier 3 tool, like how do we compete with tier 1? We can't.
Yeah.
We all have to level up.
What's the fastest growing area, vendor market? Is it compliance? Is it EDR? Is it, as you said, like this AI data lake thing? Like, where do you see kind of the next growth explosion of vendors or a need? Like, what's on your wish list? I guess I'm asking.
I think if you look at CIS level 1, control 1, it's about asset management. It's the visibility, right? So GRC is the biggest space right now, and GRC is helping you get in a sense of what are my policies, what's my attack surface, what do we have, and then how do we secure it? So first is GRC, then it's like, hey, let's like start securing it, and then let's start automating that. So I think compliance automation is the number one, because we all need to know what do we have and how do we secure it.
Yeah, no, you mentioned Draught Advanced Secure Frame, right? Like unicorns out of nowhere. So
yeah,
in your neighborhood, right? $2-3 billion valuation. So
yeah,
certainly that happened quick. So I think we'll continue to see that. We're almost at the top of the hour. Final thoughts. Jesse, you want to go first, or Henry? Why don't you go first?
Well, I'll unpack. I always enjoy talking with Dan because he just has a perspective that I think I would try to strive to maintain internally as well. Final thoughts though here. I think it's an interesting perspective for me always when we get to do these, because I spend so much of my time focused on like one thing, right? Which credit to you there, Dan. Hopefully we're focusing on our one thing well enough for you guys. But it is always great for us to be able to get the external perspective, like, hey, what is sort of the overall market trend? What is it you guys are striving to do, right? What are the things that you're looking for us to be a tier 1 solution for you? Or what do we have to do to get there? And all those things, I think, are sort of always my takeaways from these. And then maybe the only other thing, just assuming, I were to ever fail my company, I do have a Raspberry Pi on my desk. So when I come looking for a job, I just want to say that it's there. A little dusty, but
he's got it all in cameras. He was like, here it is.
Funny. Jesse, you want to go?
Yeah. This has been really fun for me today. First time meeting Dan and getting to hear about a lot of the same principles that we did in our MSP back when we built our security business that he's using to be successful in his, and to even go above and beyond the success that we had. Takeaway is start somewhere, pick up a shovel. The best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time is today. And so it's not too late, and you just start moving, problem solving, and moving forward. So that's what I took away from it.
Awesome. Kromsky.
Man, I love the nickname use. I appreciate it.
I saw it on your LinkedIn.
I love the LinkedIn feature of having a nickname. I've nickname in high school and I kept it ever since. But my takeaway from this is MSPs shouldn't be wary about necessarily having too much in their stack if they're doing it the right way. And if you're impressed by Dan's MSP and what he's doing, remember, Sention is part of that stack. So a step in the right direction to plug myself.
Awesome. Shameless plug. I love it. Keeney, any other thoughts before I close it out?
I just think if I could parrot Dan's perspective of find the next problem and solve it. If we could all take that into all aspects of our lives, professional and personal, I think the world would be a better place. So glad that was a big highlight for you.
Yeah, that was awesome. Just the innovation that he's pushing. Well, Dan, thanks again for coming on. Henry, Kromsky, love it. Next week, we're talking with Fifth Wall, MSP cyber insurance, small business insurance. They are clearly at the center of all things cyber insurance. Will Brooks, myself, Jesse for sure, Beachman, Tim Golden will be back. So enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you next Friday. Excited for that one.
Yeah,
thanks for having us, Tim.
Everyone.
Thank you.